On the afternoon of February 5th, 1981, at Forest Hills Central Middle School in Grand Rapids, Michigan, a seemingly ordinary evening unfolded. 14-year-old brunette 8th grader Dean Marie Peters, known affectionately as Deanie, was at the school with her mother Mary and a family friend, watching her 6-year-old brother wrestle. Sometime around 5 o'clock, Deanie decided to leave the gymnasium, a simple act that would become her last known movement. This decision would plunge her family into an agonizing search and launch a cold case that has baffled investigators for over 4 decades. This is the haunting story of Deanie Peters, a life tragically cut short, a mystery shrouded in conflicting accounts, and a relentless pursuit of truth that continues to this very day. Deanie got up from her gym seat, headed towards the cafeteria, turned around, and waved at a close family friend, Ariadne Herbert, saying, "I'll be right back." Ariadne assumed Deanie was heading to the bathroom, a common reason for a brief departure. But 15 minutes stretched to 20, then 30 minutes, and Deanie had not returned. Concern began to ripple through the small group. They checked with others who had been in the bathroom area, but no one had seen Deanie. They expanded their search through the cafeteria, through the gym. They even ventured outside and looked for her there. No one knew where Deanie was. 45 years later, we still don't know where Deanie is. As we delve into the possible suspects in this case, you might think you know exactly who did it. But hang on, because there's a significant twist in this story that we'll explore in a bit. A witness who spoke to the police was the last known person to see Deanie that afternoon. Kent County Detective Ken Kleinhexel, the first detective on the case, stated, "At the time, she was last seen by the back door of the school. She was walking side by side with a friend or a girlfriend or with a young lady approximately 15 to 17, 18 years old, and they were talking, and there was no argument. There was no disturbance." According to the Charlie Project, Deanie was a bit of a rebel. Sometimes she would leave home and stay at a friend's house without permission. She also smoked cigarettes, so some people thought perhaps she had gone outside to smoke, but no one saw her anywhere. 2 days before her disappearance, Deanie had been involved in a physical altercation at school with 2 or 3 other girls. It is believed the fight took place outside the school, over a boy Deanie was dating at the time. The 2 girls allegedly made threats, telling Deanie to stay away from him. One of the girls was the boy's sister. Detectives would later confirm it was a significant enough fight that school officials had documented it. One of Deanie's best friends had witnessed the fight and immediately told a detective about it. However, for reasons unknown, the original lead detective later stated he didn't learn about this crucial fight until several years after Deanie vanished. He attributed this delay to a lack of communication, a frustrating oversight that may have hampered the early investigation. Deanie's biological father, Duane Powell, lived in California at the time, and some of her friends claimed she had discussed running away to see him. She was reportedly experiencing some issues at home with her stepfather and had lived in California as a young child when her parents were still together. Former Kent County Sheriff's Department Sergeant Kenneth Kleinhexel, who passed away in 2018, told the Petoskey News Review in 1981, "Her friends told me her stepfather, was kind of old-fashioned. She wanted to do things like an older person. We all have problems at home." According to an investigation by MLive, when Deanie's mom checked her room at home, she found several $100s worth of her Christmas money, along with her clothing, jewelry, wallet, and purse, still in the house. Her mom also found Deanie's diary in her room and promptly turned it over to the police. Despite this, police spoke many times with authorities in California, as well as with her stepfather, but there was no evidence of her ever showing up there. Her father confirmed she never told him she was planning to come see him. Years later, Deanie's father shared the final letter he ever received from her, written just a few weeks before she vanished. The letter, penned by a loving daughter, read, "Dear Daddy, I miss you so. I just wish I could see you. I still haven't gotten your present, but maybe by the time you get this letter, I'll get it. Oh, Daddy, you're going to be so proud of me when I tell you how I'm doing in school. I got 2 B's and 1 A+ on my math test. Then I got 2 B's and 1 A on my science test. I have a big picture of me for you this year. I hope you like it. Well, Dad, how was your New Year? How was your Christmas? Mine was okay, I guess, but it brought back a lot of memories of you and my brothers and sisters. Well, almost the whole school knows about you and how great you are. My boyfriend wants to meet you. His name is Larry, but everybody calls him Guy. Well, Daddy, let's start keeping in touch better. I miss you so much. I just wish I could see you. Love your daughter, Deanie. P.S. Take care of yourself. Miss you. From his heartfelt letter, we learned that Deanie was excelling in school. She deeply missed her dad, and she had a boyfriend named Larry who went by Guy. While she expressed a strong desire to see her father, there was no mention of any plans to run away to do so. Missing persons investigations often face initial setbacks when police spend valuable time pursuing the runaway theory, and this case was no exception. However, it didn't take long for police to shift their focus and begin a more intensive search for Deanie, and they quickly zeroed in on a potential suspect. According to MLive, Arthur Diaz, a 40-year-old janitor at Forest Hills Central Middle School, was working the night Deanie vanished. Kids at the school affectionately called him Mr. Art. He stated he was cleaning the office at the school that afternoon, around 5 p.m., and claimed he never saw Deanie that day. However, he knew who she was, describing her as a sharp kid, a good-looking gal. She was a happy-go-lucky kid. Deanie's mom later revealed that Mr. Art had even helped her search for her daughter immediately after she went missing. At the time, the school had a gas-fired incinerator used for burning papers and food scraps. Police theorized that Arthur might have attempted to burn Deanie's body in the incinerator. They investigated the incinerator, but found no evidence of it being used for such a purpose. They also discovered that the incinerator wasn't even hot enough to burn paper books, making the cremation of a body impossible. About a week after Deanie disappeared, her mom and stepfather visited the school to speak with Mr. Art. He expressed his sorrow about Deanie's disappearance and then shared some potentially important information. He claimed he had heard a banging on one of the school's locked doors during the wrestling event the night Deanie went missing. He described seeing 3 high school-age boys at the door, one wearing a green and white Forest Hills Central jacket. He stated he didn't recognize any of the boys and did not let them into the school. He also claimed he had already shared this story with detectives. However, Mr. Art later said police never asked him for a description of the boys, nor did they present him with a photo lineup. About a month after Deanie vanished, police showed up at the school and arrested Mr. Art. He spent a night in jail. According to Wood TV, he had a cellmate at the jail who had been planted there by the police department, a cellmate who owed detectives a favor. Mr. Art believed the man was an undercover cop and therefore said little to him, maintaining his innocence. The next day, he was brought to testify before a grand jury. He recounted their accusations. They thought I had kidnapped her and sold her somewhere in Chicago or somewhere in Nevada. I have some friends out in Nevada, and I'm saying you are nuts. I've been here all this time. He hired an attorney, costing him $1,600, and was present when police searched his property. In 1984, Mr. Art quit his job with the school, stating, "I thought I was living in a nightmare. You're going to hang me for something I didn't do." He died on September 13, 2013, having been officially ruled out as a suspect in Deanie's case. Shortly after Deanie vanished, police began hearing a disturbing story about a man named Bruce Bunch, who was a 17-year-old junior at the high school at the time. According to Sergeant Kleinhexel, Bruce was reportedly the boyfriend of one of the girls Deanie had fought with 2 days before her disappearance. The Charlie Project details the story police heard. Bruce was allegedly in the parking lot outside the middle school the night Deanie went missing. He saw her come outside, possibly to smoke a cigarette, and decided to scare her. He drove his car toward her, but hit a patch of ice, lost control, and accidentally ran over her, killing her. The story continues that he then grabbed her and threw her body into some bushes, returning later to take her away and bury her. Bruce himself admitted to having a dream about Deanie and confessed to telling multiple people about this dream. He told MLive, "When I was a kid, I used to have this mental telepathy thing. I could tell things like when a bird comes into your house and tells you someone's going to die." This unusual belief system added another layer of intrigue to his story. Interestingly, the superstition of a bird flying into a house as a sign of impending death is a common folklore belief. At some point, Bruce left Michigan and opened an auto repair shop in Somerset, Kentucky. His first wife, Beth Harmon Vaught, who has since passed away, described him as abusive and violent towards her. She stated he drank heavily and would sometimes black out, having no memory of his actions. He'd get up the next day, get moving, and say, "I did what?" Beth recounted. She also recalled, "I know that he was a big drinker when I was with him, and there were sometimes some pretty scary times when he and I had our little scuffles." Bruce seemed troubled many times through the years. "I can't explain anything as to why he was having nightmares." Beth even claimed Bruce had once shoved her out of a moving vehicle, resulting in a broken ankle. Despite these allegations, Bruce had no criminal record in Kentucky or Michigan. However, court documents obtained by Wood TV show that Beth filed for a domestic violence protection order in 1994, in which she wrote that he will do anything to keep me, such as beating me, killing me, or blowing his own head off. Also, he looks for me when I'm away from the house and says he'll run me off the road. He was a loud, obnoxious, forceful person. Bruce and Beth divorced in 1998 after 15 years of marriage. Beth was never certain if Bruce was involved in Deanie's disappearance, but she speculated, "I don't know why, but I've always had an idea that if Bruce was involved with it, it was probably an accident, and he was probably drunk in a car, and he and maybe others just got scared and did the wrong thing back when." Bruce's cousin, Kirby Johnson, defended him, stating, "Most of the time he was a teddy bear. Yeah, he got drunk, definitely, yeah. He was a mean drunk, definitely at times, you know." She adamantly added, "Bruce didn't do this." Take his name out of everybody's mouth. Retired Michigan State Police Detective SGT Sally Walter told Wood TV in 2021, "We could never eliminate Bruce Bunch, and I believe that we already uncovered some proof that Bruce had some involvement in this along with others, and our focus then went to those people." A police source also indicated that one of the girls involved in the fight with Deanie days before she disappeared was Bruce's ex-girlfriend. At the time of Deanie's disappearance, Bruce was 17 years old, living with his family in a double-wide trailer on Grand River Drive. He was not a good student, but excelled at fixing cars. In 1989, a woman interviewed by the press claimed that during a canoe trip on the Flat River, a man in her canoe confessed that he, along with two other people, had hit a girl named Deanie with a car in a school parking lot. They got scared and threw her body in the trunk. Bruce Bunch was not named as part of this group. One man identified as part of this group was Joseph Fallstrom. Joseph stated he was questioned by detectives in the early 1990s who told him, "We heard you and your brother ran her down at a party." Joseph denied any involvement and claimed he had heard a similar story from Bruce Bunch, but this version did not involve Joseph at all. Joseph recounted hearing Bruce Bunch talking about Deanie during a kegger they both attended. He's throwing a big fit, crying and blubbering and saying, "I killed her. I killed Deanie Peters." And he kept carrying on about it, and I bumped one of my friends and I said, "What's he talking about?" "Oh, that's just Bruce. When he gets drunk, he's a poor me baby." Joseph said Bruce told him her body was buried on a property about 5 miles north of Lowell, Michigan, where an old one-room standard school is located. He was haunted by the chains clanging on the maypole behind the schoolhouse where he claims to have buried her, Joseph stated. Former Lowell Police Chief Barry Emmons confirmed he had searched the old schoolhouse shortly after Deanie vanished, but found nothing strange. After years of dormancy, Deanie's case went cold. Then, in March of 2008, the Kent County Metro Cold Case Team was created. This was a collaborative effort of detectives from Michigan State Police, Grand Rapids, and Kent County, funded by a $300,000 grant. Detectives from the newly formed team revisited Mr. Art, the school janitor. They asked him to take a polygraph test, but he refused. Despite his refusal, he was eventually ruled out as a suspect, but the experience left a lasting shadow on him. "There's going to be doubt in somebody's mind somewhere," he told Wood TV. "It leave a little shadow over your head. It's not a halo up there. It's a dark cloud." Mr. Art passed away on September 13th, 2013. In 2014, police followed up on the lead from the lady in the canoe, making their way to Heather Road. This was a private road leading to the site of a former young Marines camp, about 30 minutes from Forest Hills Central Middle School and 7 minutes from the abandoned schoolhouse. The property sits directly on the Flat River. Police arrived with cadaver dogs and conducted extensive searches, including digging. They returned to the property 3 years later for additional searches. What, if anything, they found during those 2 searches remains undisclosed to the public. In March of 2008, cold case investigators reopened Deanie's case, and one of the first individuals they re-examined was Joseph Falstrom. He agreed to take a polygraph test. At its conclusion, the operator informed him, "Mr. Falstrom, I'm going to pass this along to the detectives. You're clearly not part of this." Joseph confirmed, "Yeah, that's what I've been saying for the past 20-some years." He was also able to produce an ironclad alibi, a United States Army document proving he was training at Fort Benning, Georgia, at the time Deanie went missing. Wood TV spoke to a source close to the investigation who confirmed these Army papers officially eliminated him as a suspect. The reason for the delay in Joseph locating these crucial documents for so many years remains unknown. A little over a year later, on May 12, 2009, police and others returned to the old schoolhouse and began digging. Kent County Sheriff Larry Stelma explained, "They used a mechanical excavator here to skim the topsoil." Michigan State University Department of Anthropology was brought in to examine the soil for disturbances, even decades later. When there's a change in the soil composition, then they can point out where that soil's been disturbed or it hasn't been disturbed, Stelma said. However, police apparently didn't find anything of interest in this search. Retired Detective Klein Hexel, who had continued to investigate Deanie's case as a private detective after his retirement in 1994, announced in 2010 that he'd found a new witness. This woman, who lived in Lowell at the time, had already spoken to the cold case team. She revealed that a group of people had shown up at her house one night, and one individual acting strangely was a name police were very familiar with. He came that night, Bruce Bunch did, and he was just upset and just goofy. And he said, "Today I was at a school and didn't mention the name of the school, and I hit a girl with my car." He said, "I either backed over her or ran over her, and I killed her." So he loaded her up in the car, and I don't know who the we is, and took her out. And they took her down Cascade to Snow Avenue. At the end of Snow Avenue comes the freeway, and they took her out. And there's a pile of rocks. They laid her on the ground and covered her up with a big pile of rocks. Klein Hexel assumed that if this story was true, Bruce likely moved her body after the spring thaw to another location. Bruce Bunch's only daughter, Janelle Gynam, confirmed to Wood TV that her father did have some sort of connection with Deanie. "Yeah, he met her. That's what he told me. He met her," she said. She also admitted he drank heavily and could be unpleasant when intoxicated. He was a very lovable guy, even though it was because of his mouth, Janelle stated. Her father never spoke about Deanie until a retired detective, likely Klein Hexel, called their house looking for him. At that point, she directly asked him, "Did you have anything to do with it, Dad?" She said he forcefully denied any involvement in Deanie's disappearance. Bruce died of a heart attack on February 1st, 2008, at just 44 years old. He was buried on February 5th, 2008, 27 years to the day from Deanie's disappearance, in Somerset, Kentucky. Around 2010, a Wood TV reporter tracked down one of the girls who had argued with Deanie at school. Her name at the time was Sue Atchison, now Sue Harmon. She confirmed the fight to the TV station. "It wasn't like we pounded on her. We probably threatened her, which was a bad thing." Sue had recently taken a lie detector test administered by police and admitted she failed it. "Heck no," she exclaimed when asked if she passed. "If I knew something, why wouldn't I tell? This was 30 years ago. Why didn't they talk to us 30 years ago, when we remembered?" This begs the question, why didn't she come forward earlier? The plot thickens as Sue's husband, Rob Harmon, is the nephew of former Detective Jack Christensen, one of the lead investigators on Deanie's case for several years. Adding to the list of bizarre occurrences, Deanie's diary, which was once in police custody, mysteriously went missing. The circumstances of its disappearance remain unexplained, leading to speculation about whether it was an accident or if someone intentionally removed it. Official statement and first arrest. James Frisbee in early 2021, around the 40-year anniversary of Deanie's disappearance, police made a significant announcement. They publicly stated that Bruce Bunch was likely the person responsible for Deanie's death. However, just a few months later, a major twist unfolded in the case when the first arrest ever was made in regards to Deanie's disappearance. James Douglas Jim Frisbee, owner of Frisbee Sign Company in Ada, Michigan, became the focus of this new development. On July 2, 2021, Deputy Dan Bishop arrived at his business to arrest 61-year-old James. The probable cause affidavit obtained by WEM 15 investigates details James's resistance. Bishop advised James that he was under arrest and asked him to turn around. James replied with nope. Bishop asked James to turn around again so he could be placed in handcuffs. James again replied no. James then said, "I'm not going to court," and attempted to walk past Bishop into the open garage door. Bishop stopped James from walking into the garage and told him that he was under arrest. This was stated twice. James told Bishop that he needed to get my hands off him and balled up his fists. James continued to pull his hand away and stated multiple times that he needed to go to the bathroom, and I got to. James then called for his son, Harrison. Eventually, Bishop was able to get James in cuffs. James Frisbee was charged with 1 count of assaulting, resisting, obstructing a police officer. But the more significant charge was perjury in regards to Deanie Peters' case. The probable cause affidavit states, James Frisbee made false statements while under oath pursuant to that subpoena issued to investigate a cold case homicide. He made false statements to law enforcement and others about possible suspects and/or witnesses. James Frisbee also willfully impeded and interfered with other witnesses by instructing them to not bring their phone to scheduled investigative subpoenas. 2 of those witnesses did not bring their cellular device because of those instructions. During a preliminary hearing in a Grand Rapids courtroom in August 2021, prosecutors played a tape of a 2008 interview with James. In the interview, James claimed there were 2 men he knew who might have killed Deanie. One was a man named Kyle Fate, who worked at James's sign shop and was his friend. Witnesses testified at the hearing that Kyle was Deanie's boyfriend around the time she went missing. Tragically, Kyle died in 2008 of an accidental overdose. Susan Timmer, who dated Kyle from 1999 to 2004, testified that James called her the day Kyle died and told her, he said, "Yeah, I think he lived his life with drugs and alcohol because he felt guilty about killing Deanie Peters." Todd Parks, a friend of both James and Kyle, testified that James told him in 2009 he had a theory that Kyle was the one who killed Deanie. Todd also testified that James believed Deanie was buried somewhere near 68th Street and McCord's Avenue near Alto. Karen Knobloch, who was married to Kyle for a period, testified that she found a large photo of Deanie among Kyle's old pictures before they married. On the back of the photo was a very detailed love letter written to Kyle and signed by Deanie. Another witness, Robert Petrowski, who worked for James Frisbee, testified that he overheard James talking to Kyle, explaining how he could beat a lie detector test. James also told police in 2008 about a man named Steve Osborne, a childhood friend. In that interview, James claimed Steve Osborne could have killed Deanie and strangled her. He also stated he had heard rumors of Steve strangling and doing other terrible things to women. Steve Osborne, however, told Wood TV in 2021 that he never did any such thing to any woman. Detectives later confirmed that James lied to them, denying these accusations, which led to his perjury charge. In September 2021, Judge David J. Buter ruled that there was enough evidence to move James Frisbee's case to circuit court, where it would be presented to a jury. If found guilty, he could face up to life in prison. However, his case remains caught in the court system, and he has never been tried or convicted of anything in regards to Deanie's case. James's address on the affidavit is listed as 9434 84th Street Southeast in Alto, Michigan. He has been quite successful in his sign business, with his house listed for sale for $2,595,000, a property sitting on 54 acres with a lake. Perhaps he needs the money for attorney fees. But the house has been on the market since August 2023. Dean Peters was a good student, had no prior history of running away from home, and was not having any serious problems with her family when she disappeared. She aspired to a career as a model. She was originally from California, where her biological father lived in 1981. Her mother and stepfather, with whom she lived, moved to Arizona after her disappearance. Her stepfather has been officially ruled out as a suspect in her case. Dean was legally declared dead in 1991. The case of Dean Marie Peters remains unsolved. If you have any information about Deanie's case, please call the Kent County Sheriff's Office at 616-632-6100.
Hey, this is Tony from the Cold Case Project, where we focus on unsolved cases across the United States. Our mission is to bring attention to these unresolved mysteries that need your help. All the information we cover in these cases is readily available on the internet, but we rewrite and repurpose it for the purpose of these videos. Our goal is to spread the word about the thousands of unsolved cold cases still out there. Thank you for watching. If you want to help shed light on these cases, make sure to like and subscribe for more content. Your support can make a difference.
On a spring day in May 1991, a father said goodbye to his son at a foster care home in Grand Rapids, Michigan. This was a seemingly ordinary farewell that would become an agonizing memory just 6 days later. His son, Gordy Paige Jr., known affectionately as Gordy, vanished into thin air, leaving behind a family tormented by questions and a mystery that has baffled investigators for over 3 decades. This is the haunting story of Gordy Paige Jr., a young man with autism whose life was a journey of misdiagnosis, fleeting hopes, and an unexplained disappearance that continues to echo through the quiet corners of Michigan and beyond. Gordy Paige Jr. was born on April 15th, 1963, a child with a unique spirit, but one whose early struggles went largely undiagnosed. His parents, Gordy Paige Sr. and Linda, noticed differences from a young age. I guess maybe when he was really young, we thought something was wrong, but we didn't know what his father, Gordy Sr., recounted. He didn't walk like other kids and ran just like other kids. As he got older, he would just sit there and look around and didn't even move. His mother, Linda, also harbored suspicions. It was in junior high when Gordy realized he was slower than other kids, she recalled. His peers were starting to get ahead of him. When he needed to go into a special ed room, it bothered him. He had a hard time in the 11th and 12th grades because he couldn't keep up with everybody. Gordy understood his challenges, and the frustration of not being able to keep pace with his peers made school a difficult and often disheartening experience for him. Despite his struggles, Gordy possessed a strong work ethic and a desire for independence. After graduating high school in 1981, he landed a job at a local grocery store, a minimum wage position that brought immense joy and pride to both him and his father. "Dad, I got the job and I start Monday. Isn't that great?" Gordy exclaimed to his father, his voice filled with excitement. His father was equally proud, seeing this job as a significant step forward for Gordy. Gordy was a diligent worker, but his undiagnosed autism presented a formidable challenge. He struggled to communicate with customers and coworkers. For instance, when helping customers load groceries into their cars and receiving a thank you, Gordy wouldn't know how to respond, often just staring and smiling, a reaction that left customers feeling awkward. His father, recognizing this difficulty, tirelessly tried to coach him on social interactions. Even a home video featured on the television show Unsolved Mysteries captured Gordy Sr. trying to teach Gordy to say, "You're welcome," a poignant glimpse into their loving but challenging dynamic. Despite his best efforts and hard work, Gordy's communication difficulties ultimately led to his dismissal from the grocery store, a heartbreaking setback for a young man striving for normalcy. The loss of his job underscored the urgent need for a proper diagnosis and treatment. His parents sought the help of a social worker who evaluated Gordy and tragically misdiagnosed him with schizophrenia, a devastating error that would have profound and negative consequences. The social worker convinced his parents that Gordy needed to be in a group home, arguing that it would provide him with essential communication skills and a support system for his future when they would no longer be around. Reluctantly, his parents, who had been with him his entire life, agreed, believing it was in Gordy's best interest. At the group home, a doctor prescribed Ritalin and Valium, medications typically used for schizophrenia, a cruel twist of fate for someone who didn't have the condition. Gordy was not Gordy after that, his father lamented. The medication severely impacted him, causing him to feel as though bugs were crawling in his head and leaving him disoriented and withdrawn, a shadow of his former self. Fortunately, a new chapter began when Gordy was accepted into a different group home, one with a positive reputation. The doctors there, recognizing the previous misdiagnosis, adjusted his medication and began treating him for high-functioning autism, a monumental breakthrough. With the correct treatment, Gordy's condition improved dramatically, a glorious transformation that brought immense relief to his family. This improvement allowed his parents to pursue their own plans, and they eventually decided to move to Florida. Gordy chose to remain at his group home in Michigan, content with his progress and new environment. However, even with this positive development, a past incident hinted at his underlying struggles. While heavily medicated, Gordy had stolen an unattended running truck from the group home driveway and subsequently crashed it, leading to a bizarre encounter where police found him at a local elementary school requesting to teach a class, a testament to his confused state while on the wrong medication. It was during this incident that social worker Bill Arnold evaluated him and correctly diagnosed his autism. Once we got him off those medications and started treating him as an autistic, working, training, and just giving him respect, he was a totally different individual. Arnold stated, a powerful affirmation of the correct diagnosis and the potential for Gordy's future. With the correct diagnosis and improved well-being, Gordy's parents found him a specialized autism treatment center in Grand Rapids, Michigan. The transition, however, came with a difficult condition, a 2-month period of isolation from his family, a challenging requirement for parents who had been so intimately involved in his care. Despite the hardship, they endured the separation, believing it was for Gordy's long-term benefit. On May 21st, 1991, Gordon Sr. visited Gordy, a bittersweet reunion. As his father prepared to leave, a heart-wrenching scene unfolded. Gordy escaped his caregivers and desperately tried to get into his father's van, banging on the window and pleading, "Dad, let me in." Gordon Sr., torn between his son's desperate plea and his belief in the treatment center's program, did not let him in. "It's very painful in retrospect," Gordon Sr. later admitted. "I wish I'd allowed him to get in, crawl back, and just drive him home to Florida." This moment, a father's agonizing decision, would forever haunt him, a painful memory of a choice made with the best intentions, but one that would lead to unimaginable regret. Just 6 days after his father's departure, on May 27, 1991, Gordy Paige Jr. vanished from the Cascade foster care home. Workers conducting a midnight check discovered his absence, finding a broken window through which he had escaped. An hour later, a firefighter reported seeing a hitchhiker along Interstate 96 in Grand Rapids who matched Gordy's description, a crucial but ultimately fleeting lead. An intense search was immediately launched, but yielded no results. Gordy was wearing a t-shirt and jeans and carried no identification or cash, making travel and communication incredibly difficult. For quite some time, this single sighting by the firefighter remained the only clue to Gordy's whereabouts, leaving his family and investigators with a chilling void. One of Gordy's deepest passions was collecting baseball cards. He would spend hours meticulously studying the stats on the back of each card, memorizing hundreds of players and their teams, a remarkable feat for someone who struggled with basic math. His collection was vast, reportedly up to 30,000 cards, and it was something he cherished above almost all else. 3 of his favorite players were Robin Yount, Paul Molitor, and Eddie Murray, a detail that would later become incredibly significant. Approximately 6 weeks after his disappearance, a baseball card collection was discovered under an overpass on Interstate 96, near ramps leading to Detroit and Chicago. What made this discovery particularly striking was that 3 cards had been separated from the rest of the collection, and those 3 cards were of Robin Yount, Paul Molitor, and Eddie Murray. The odds of this being a mere coincidence were astronomically low, strongly suggesting the collection belonged to Gordy and that he had been separated from his most prized possessions under unknown circumstances. With no further confirmed sightings and the passage of time, theories began to emerge about Gordy's fate. One possibility was that he had become homeless, a common outcome for individuals with his challenges. However, despite extensive publicity and his distinct characteristics, no one reported seeing him within the large homeless populations of nearby cities. Another theory suggested he might have been admitted to a medical clinic or hospital as an unidentified patient due to his medical conditions, such as seizures, which required medication. However, this also seemed unlikely given his unique appearance and the widespread media attention his case received. The most disturbing possibility was that Gordy had met with foul play. Violence is unfortunately common among vulnerable populations, and hitchhiking carries inherent risks. The fact that his cherished baseball cards were left behind lends credence to the idea that he was taken away from them rather than abandoning them himself. It's also possible he passed away due to his medical conditions or lack of medication, and his body was never identified, despite the availability of his dental records and fingerprints. Gordy Paige Jr. had several distinctive physical characteristics that should have made him recognizable. He stood 6 feet 3 inches tall and weighed around 175 pounds, with a slender build. He had reddish-brown curly hair that was beginning to gray in the back, and striking blue eyes. A very pronounced Adam's apple was also a notable feature. He wore size 12 shoes, a detail that might stand out to anyone who encountered him. Beyond his physical appearance, Gordy possessed unique mannerisms stemming from his autism. He would often stare at people and smile as a form of greeting, a distinctive way of saying hello. Another peculiar habit was that when crossing the street, he would only move his head, not his eyes, a highly unusual and recognizable trait. He also had a light tan birthmark on his lower left rib cage, a scar under his chin, white acne scars on his back, facial hair that only grew under his nose and on his chin, and white discoloration on his teeth. These combined physical and behavioral traits should have made him easy to identify, yet he remained elusive. Gordy's hobbies provided further clues to where he might gravitate. He was a passionate collector of sports cards and enjoyed shopping at sports memorabilia, music, and antique stores. He also loved playing baseball and basketball and was a strong swimmer. These interests suggest places he might seek out or feel comfortable in. It's been speculated that he might collect empty bottles or cans along roadsides for cash, a common activity for homeless individuals. He might also be working with migrant workers, with a traveling carnival, or as a farmhand, industries that often employ transit labor. His family had owned an auto dealership, so he might linger around automotive dealerships or even tents and campsites, places that offer a sense of familiarity or quiet solitude. He generally kept to himself or stayed on the fringe of crowds, avoiding direct attention but observing his surroundings. The disappearance of Gordy Paige Jr. remains an open and unsolved case, a source of enduring pain for his family. His father, Gordon Sr., passed away in 2018, never knowing what happened to his son. But Gordy's mother, Linda, and his 2 brothers, Lance and Todd, are still alive, clinging to the hope of finding him or at least gaining some form of closure. On a cold winter day, January 9th, 1987, in Ottawa Lake, Michigan, Gail Northington, a young mother facing marital turmoil, seemingly vanished into thin air, leaving behind her infant son and a family plunged into an agonizing search for answers. Her disappearance wasn't a quiet fading away, but rather the prelude to a chilling tale of domestic violence, alleged murder, and a relentless pursuit of justice that would span decades and lead to a dramatic conviction. This is the haunting story of Gail Northington, a case that exposes the dark underbelly of a troubled marriage and the enduring pain of a life tragically cut short. Gail Northington was a young woman navigating the complexities of modern life. She had a daughter from a prior relationship and had recently embarked on a new chapter, marrying Gary Michael Northington in November 1985. Their union, however, was brief, lasting only a little over a year and quickly descending into a tumultuous period of marital difficulties. By December 1986, Gail had made the difficult decision to file for divorce, seeking an end to a relationship that had become increasingly volatile and dangerous. Due to the escalating problems at home, Gail and her infant son had moved in with her parents in Erie, Michigan, seeking refuge and safety from the escalating tension and alleged abuse that characterized her marriage to Gary Northington. This separation marked a critical turning point in Gail's life, a desperate attempt to protect herself and her children from a situation that was spiraling out of control. January 9, 1987, the day of Gail's disappearance, began with a seemingly routine task. She left her infant son in the care of her parents in Erie, Michigan, a common arrangement during her period of separation from Gary. Her intention was to return to her home on Samaria Road, west of US 23 and Ottawa Lake, to pick up some essential items, clothes and food for herself and her children, a simple errand that should have taken only a short time. But Gail Northington never returned from that trip. She was never heard from again. The hours stretched into days, and the growing silence from Gail became a terrifying reality for her family, a chilling confirmation that something was terribly wrong. 11 days after Gail was last seen, on January 20th, her car was discovered abandoned at an apartment complex in Oregon, Ohio. The location of the vehicle was approximately 20 miles from her home in Ottawa Lake. This discovery provided the first tangible clue in her disappearance, but also deepened the mystery. Why was her car left so far from her residence, and why was Gail nowhere to be found? The abandoned vehicle hinted at a sudden and unplanned departure, or perhaps a more sinister intervention. The lack of any sign of Gail at the scene of her abandoned car sent a wave of fear through her family and the investigators, now faced with a missing person case that had taken a disturbing turn. As the investigation unfolded, Gail's family came forward with horrifying details about her marriage to Gary Michael Northington. They described Gary as possessive, controlling, and deeply abusive towards Gail, a pattern of behavior that had allegedly escalated throughout their brief marriage. In court, Gary himself admitted that problems began just weeks after they married in November 1985, a startling admission that underscored the immediate and severe nature of their marital discord. He even confessed to acts of violence and destruction, admitting he had burned Gail's clothes and deliberately flattened the tires on her car. These admissions painted a clear picture of a volatile and dangerous relationship, one where control and intimidation were allegedly central themes. The family's testimony and Gary's own statements provided a crucial context for Gail's disappearance, suggesting a strong motive for foul play. The investigation soon turned to Gary Northington and the couple's shared home. When police examined Gary's van, a vehicle that could have been used to transport Gail or her remains, they discovered a deeply suspicious detail. The van had been meticulously washed and bleached, an obvious attempt to remove any potential forensic evidence that might link it to Gail's disappearance. This act of deliberate cleaning immediately raised red flags for investigators, suggesting a desperate attempt to conceal a crime. But the most chilling discovery came when police searched the couple's home. There, amidst the personal belongings and remnants of a life shared, they found a gruesome instrument used for reasons I'll let you determine. The presence of this gruesome tool, soaked in blood within their residence, was a horrifying piece of evidence that pointed directly to violence. The combination of the freshly cleaned van and the blood-stained blade presented a compelling narrative of foul play and a desperate attempt to cover up a heinous act. In the wake of Gail's disappearance, her parents, driven by love and a desperate need to protect their grandson, initiated legal proceedings for custody of Gail and Gary's infant son. This custody battle unfolded against the backdrop of Gail's vanishing and brought Gary Northington further under the scrutiny of the law. Less than a month after Gail was last seen, Gary was arrested for perjury. He had lied in court during the custody battle, a desperate attempt to gain an advantage in the legal proceedings. This act of deception further eroded his credibility and deepened suspicions about his involvement in Gail's disappearance. But the legal troubles for Gary Northington were just beginning. He was subsequently charged with trying to arrange Gail's murder the day before she went missing, a shocking revelation that suggested a premeditated plan to eliminate her. The charges of conspiracy to commit murder and solicitation to commit murder painted a chilling picture of Gary's alleged intentions and his willingness to resort to extreme measures to resolve his marital difficulties. Gary Michael Northington's legal journey was long and arduous, his trials becoming a focal point in the pursuit of justice for Gail. In October, he was convicted of both conspiracy to commit murder and solicitation to commit murder, a verdict that brought a measure of relief to Gail's grieving family. The court sentenced him to life in prison without the possibility of parole, a seemingly definitive end to a dark chapter. However, Gary's conviction was later overturned on appeal, a legal setback that reopened old wounds and prolonged the family's agony. The appeals court found grounds to overturn the initial verdict, necessitating a second trial. But the legal system ultimately prevailed. Gary Northington was convicted again at his second trial for the same charges, a powerful affirmation of the evidence presented against him. To this day, Gary Michael Northington remains incarcerated, serving his life sentence. In the wake of the legal battles and Gary's conviction, Gail's parents were granted full custody of her son. They lovingly raised him as their own, providing him with a stable and nurturing environment despite the immense grief and trauma they had endured. The decision to raise their grandson was a profound act of love, a way to keep Gail's memory alive and to ensure her son had the best possible upbringing. Gail's father has since passed away, a sad loss for the family, but her mother and siblings are still alive, continuing to carry the weight of Gail's disappearance and cherishing the memories of a daughter and sister tragically lost. Despite the conviction of Gary Michael Northington and the closure brought by the legal process, Gail Northington herself has never been found.